Hiroshi Lockheimer. What's a day in the life like for you? Do you eat an acai bowl in the morning? Do you like to ride your bike to Google? Like, what's it like when you get into the office every morning?
Well, first of all, hello everyone, good to see you, and thanks for coming. Today is Bike to Work Day, by the way. I don't know if you...
Oh, is it?
It is, actually, at Google. I don't know, is that a US-wide thing, or is it like a Google thing? I have no idea, but it's Bike to Work Day. There's a bunch of people biking. I was not one of those people, because I live a little bit further away, and you were asking, do I have an acai bowl? I do not. I actually don't even know how to pronounce that word. I'm just copying how you said it.
It took me a while to figure it out.
I drop off the kids at school in the morning. I come to work. And I'm in meetings all day, basically, either with the team internally, or a large chunk of what we do on across Android or Chrome, Chrome OS Play. We deal with partners, whether that's manufacturers or developers or operators. So have a lot of meetings with internal and external people. I travel a lot, also. I get to see the world, which is kind of nice.
I see your Instagrams.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's kind of my typical day, is meetings, kid stuff, family stuff.
Meetings, yes, and
Yeah.
kid stuff. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, the balance of life. So there were a ton of new features announced this week for Android Q. It's coming out, if anybody listened to the keynote the other day. And you go to work every day. How do you and the team figure out what the heck to put into the next version of Android? Like, how do you guys come up with, we need to tackle this feature, we need to tackle this setting, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. We have some ideas, things that we want to pursue that we think are important. So there's sort of ideas that we generate ourselves, but also ideas that come from our partners too. For instance, manufacturers may say, hey, we're going to build a phone that folds, and then we'll be like, oh, okay, let's figure out how that's going to work from a software perspective.
Right.
Maybe there's a screen on the outside and a screen on the inside. How should these things interact? Or someone might say, we're going to add a fingerprint sensor to a Chromebook. Okay, let's support that.
Right.
So there's sort of external influences like that. There's internal ideas, as I mentioned. We also look at feedback from developers.
I was going to ask if you're ever going around the internet and
Of
seeing what
course.
people are saying.
We definitely do that, and Steph isn't here right here. She's not here right now, but she runs a process. Her and her team. Steph Cuthbertson,
Right.
who was at the keynote. She meets with developers regularly and gets sort of a wish list, if you will, and she helps prioritize that. And so your voice really matters in terms of what we do.
Do you ever use Android or the platforms, the ecosystem that you manage and go, dang, I really need to fix that, or we really need to get people on that?
Yeah, I think everyone has their own, I'm a user too, right? So I have my own pet things that I feel a little bit like I'll send feedback to the team. I'll be like, why does this work this way? And so usually they say, and then they just kind of keep on doing what they're doing, which is, great for me. But yeah, yes, absolutely. Everyone has their
So
sort
is
of
that
set of
how
things.
dark mode came about? You
Dark
were
mode,
saying this is too darn bright.
I will say, I'm personally, I actually saw this, someone tweeted this yesterday, and I have to agree, I'm personally not a huge dark mode person. I don't know if that makes me, I don't know. How many of you are excited about dark mode? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of you are excited about dark mode. So I'm an outlier. I'm fine with how it has been, but you all, your feedback was heard, and that became sort
Exactly.
of a roadmap item for sure.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about privacy and security, a particularly hot topic in this day and age, especially recently. So there are a couple new features announced in Android Q to sort of give more control to both users and developers to kind of let people decide when and where their data and certain elements of the interface or the operating system are shared, both with Google and third parties. Can you talk a bit about how and when the team decided to head into this direction? How did you all decide that it was going to be something as obvious as just having a full readout of permissions and just ticking on and off what you wanted?
Yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit of the not to sound dramatic, but a little bit of the history too.
Yeah.
Security. You mentioned privacy and security.
Yeah.
Let me talk about security first. I think security has been I know security has been an important part of Android from I think your question was about Android, so I'll
Yes.
answer about Android. For Android, very important from day one. Chrome OS too, by the way. You know, if you think about it, the Android team, we had the benefit of having seen how computing evolved throughout the decades. You know, we saw, for instance, how Windows and how security was dealt with on Windows, you know, in the 80s, 90s, and so on. So we built the system with a lot of security built in from the ground up, you know, how sandboxing or, you know, things like that. The fact that there's even a Play Store where we know who you are as a developer and we can have a relationship and so on and have policies, some of which you may not like, but at least we have some ground rules. And so Android has been developed with security in mind from day one. And so that's always been important, and we've been continually improving on that front. Privacy is interesting. It wasn't that privacy wasn't important before, but I think how people think about privacy in light of technology has really evolved a lot, especially in the past year or so. You know, and I think a lot of us here, you know, if we're all in the tech industry, we're reading the news, we're seeing what's happening, we're hearing about the conversations. And so I would say there's definitely been a renewed effort around privacy, even though it's been important from before. I think what's important and how people think about privacy has evolved, so we wanted to adapt to that and expose new capabilities and new controls and transparency, you know, sort of urgently. So that's what we worked on in Q, and it won't end in Q. You know, it's security and privacy is one of those things I think it will continually be evolving and something that we'll continue to work on. I think that we took a big step in Q, however.
Well, it just seems to be more part of the conversation these days, and I feel like even users are more aware of what privacy and security means and
Right.
little devices that we have in our hands. Perhaps it's something that maybe some of us haven't thought about until recently.
Yeah, well, you know, I think one of the, even if you have thought about it, you know, I think I'll give you, and then maybe this is, I'm going to get booed for bringing up SMS and call log. You know, I know a lot of developers were a little bit frustrated with the changes that we made on that front. You know, the thinking 10, 12 years ago when that capability first, we made that available was, well, of course, you know, it's a permission and the developer asks the user for permission, and if the user understands it and they say yes to this, then that's fine, because our assumption was, you know, developers have the user's best interests in mind, and users and developers understand each other. But I think what we realized over the past decade is sometimes that's not always the case.
Right.
You know, all of you have great intentions, but there are some developers that don't have the best intentions and will use capabilities in ways that we hadn't really anticipated. You know, so an example, by the way, is there's even cases where it's not really that you're trying to do anything nefarious, it's just these capabilities are not granular enough. I'll give you an example. Some of you may have used the SMS permission because you wanted to do two-factor authentication. You just wanted an SMS to be able to authenticate. But the whole permission was like you have access to everything, and so it wasn't granular enough. So we've created APIs for two-factor specifically, so it's scoped to that purpose only, and you can't really use it for other things. You know, that's the kind of thing that how we're evolving the platform, and so I think our understanding of the world is evolving.
How do you figure out how to make that user-friendly for the average user versus somebody who may be a seasoned Android user?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. Another thing that I think you know, all this sounds obvious in retrospect, but it wasn't that obvious to us 10 years ago, is what we thought was obvious to a user, turns out a lot of these things were not obvious to users. You know, so one of if you all remember, I forget before which release it was, but you know, we used to have install time permissions as opposed to runtime permissions. And one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why we switched to runtime permissions is because we realized most users, they're at the Play Store, they hit the install button, and they're just going to right away hit the accept all permissions because they're just trying to install an app. They're not really thinking about, like, why do I have to decide now whether this app can use my camera or not? And it made a lot more sense in context. When the user says, yes, I want to use a camera, that's when you get the permission dialog. And so these kinds of things I think we're learning as an industry on how to make it easier for users to understand and interact. And you know, I think developers and the platform provider, you know, we need to continually sort of experiment and learn and try to help users understand. Most people, you know, they have like, this is what we do for a living, right? We think about technology, we build stuff, most people, that's not what they do. Most people, like, a phone is a tool, you know,
Yeah.
to get on with their life. So they don't want to be thinking about this stuff.
Fair, yeah.
Right? So,
Right.
so how do we make it easy for them, I think, is the key point. You know, and I think sometimes we know too much.
It's also nice to be able to go back and fix if you're rushing through some dialog windows to make sure that maybe the camera is no longer accessible.
Right,
When it shouldn't
exactly.
be. Or your location, too, which is another big feature of Android,
No, that's
too.
great. Yeah, so
coming.
those are the,
Yeah.
as you point out, those are the screens that we've added so that you can go back and audit and say, okay,
Right.
who did I give permission to do what again? And
Yeah.
you can decide. Maybe that doesn't make sense anymore. You know, at least so
Absolutely.
there's transparency and then there's controls.
Absolutely. So, being that this is a crowd of developers and we have a lot tuning in right now, what should they know about these new privacy and security features and about implementing them into their apps?
In terms of technology, you mean, or just like?
Just in terms of making it friendly for users who are coming
Yeah,
to Android.
I think that's a key point. I mean, some of these things are obvious, I think, but you know, don't do things that you don't need to do. You know, a lot of times, you know, we do this at Google too, where we'll be like, well, maybe eventually we'll want this permission, or maybe eventually we'll want to be able to do this, so you ask for these capabilities.
Right.
But if you're actually not going to need it, like, don't ask for it, you know,
Right,
because
right.
otherwise the user's going to be confused too, and it's just unnecessary. You know, so things like that, just being really thoughtful and mindful about what you're trying to do, or you know, trying to scope as much as possible, you know, the access to the bare minimum of what you need, I think is important. Because people do notice this stuff, and it is an important part of how people, I think, also decide whether they want to use an app versus another, you know.
I like that idea of mindful developing. I feel like that's a good. So,
By the way, just out of curiosity,
Yes.
how many in the crowd, how many of you are Android developers? Well, okay, most of you. Web? Yeah, a lot of you also. Okay, other platform? All right, cool. Good mix.
all right, it's a good mix. So, how do you kind of you manage more than just Android? You are also overseeing Play, and you're overseeing Chrome OS. How do you try to keep the ecosystems on track? Like, is there a shared ethos or a philosophy that sort of helps drive the decisions that y'all are making, you know, as a team? And how do you ensure that you stick to that philosophy or that ethos with every new release of Android?
Yeah, I think one of the, I'm going to make it sound very dramatic, one of the key insights that we have is that you all are busy. And you have a lot of things to do, and you have your own plans, and own roadmaps, and own priorities, and maybe your own bosses. Maybe you're your own boss, but you have bosses who have other priorities. So the last thing you kind of want to deal with is like the platform provider telling you what your priorities should be. So we try to minimize that as much as possible. Obviously, whenever we change platforms, we realize we introduce work for you. Opportunities, too.
Right.
So there's a balance there. So that's one of the things that we think about deeply. So in that, keeping that in mind, to answer your question, across Android and Chrome OS, for instance, you know, I see Play as being one unifying ecosystem. You know, you can run, as many of you know, you can run Android apps on many Chromebooks now, and that's going to continue. And that's a way for you to have your investment, in this example, in an Android app, be useful in the context of a different form factor, even a different platform, Chrome OS. And so we're sharing as much technology as possible and making it so that when you do your work, it is useful in as many surfaces or in as many ways as possible. That's sort of one of the key things that, you know, you're asking, how do we think about all this? That's a sort of a key thing we think about. We also, you know, focus a lot. I was talking to Steph the other day, and she was talking about how it's really important for us, and we're not always successful in doing this, especially as the industry evolves, but as much as possible to keep compatibility, you know, so that APIs you rely on today will still be reliable, you know, 2 years from now. Obviously, sometimes we're not able to do that, especially with, you know, like SMS call log is a perfect example, but that's something that's important for us because we know that's important for you as well. And also just having great tools. You know, you saw us investing in, a lot of you are Android developers, so, you know, Kotlin, you know, we're bringing Android Studio to Chrome OS. We announced that here and made it really easy for people to download these tools and use them. So those are also areas that we're investing a ton in.
So, as a platform, Android has been very open for a very long time. Do you feel like it's a delicate balancing act, just getting OEMs and others to adhere to exactly what Android is trying to do for mobile computing?
Yeah, it's, it is, we have literally hundreds and hundreds of
Literally
OEMs.
hundreds and hundreds.
Yes, and many hundreds and hundreds of operators throughout the world, and many, many, many developers around the world as well. So it's kind of this melting pot, right? Of a lot of, we're all interested in the same thing, which is being successful in our businesses and building, creative, innovative things and bringing it to consumers. I think that's what we're all about, if I were to simplify it. But we all have different motivations and we play different roles, And so we see, as a platform provider, we see our role as being sort of the party that brings a lot of these perspectives together, and sometimes they don't always line up, and even just in the OEM space, there's, if you think about, we work closely with Samsung, we work closely with LG, we work closely with the Pixel team, who, by the way, we treat as an OEM, right? We treat them as just another OEM alongside Samsung and LG, and you name, however many OEMs there are in the world.
Right.
And they all compete with each other, these OEMs. And so they share their secrets with us, and we're careful not to share their secrets with anyone else because they're trusting us. And they have different opinions, and so then it becomes our job to try to figure out the best way to navigate that. And I think that's same for developers, the same for operators. And so we spend a lot of, I mentioned earlier, when you asked, what my typical day is, and I said I spend a lot of time with partners, that's part of the reason, is to understand everyone's perspectives, understand what's important for you and for the operator and for the OEM, and try to bring it together that way. It's fun. It's fun. Sundar sometimes says, you're kind of like the United Nations. I've never worked at the United Nations. I don't know what that's like, but I assume, at least, I don't know if he has, but yeah, but that's what it seems like sometimes. But it's fun.
When did you guys decide that you were gonna just make Android work on foldable displays?
Yeah, well, that again, that came up because Samsung, but Samsung wasn't the only one. There are many OEMs, some which have been announced, some that haven't been announced yet.
This was going around for years.
Yes.
It's been this idea.
Yeah, this idea, and now it's possible. And so a lot of OEMs have approached us over the years, and another example of this, you talked about foldables, but now it seems like all phones are like this. But just a few years ago, the aspect ratio of most phones were more sort of square. They became taller. They grew notches. Do you grow a notch or do you subtract a notch? I don't know what direction a notch goes. But those are all things that happen roughly at the same time for the whole industry, because that's just how the supply chain works. These vendors who build displays are able to do this, and then the OEMs, the manufacturers, buy these displays. So that's why they roughly happen at the same time. And so foldables, I think, will follow a similar pattern where these display technologies are now there for OEMs to adopt, in their products. So in the case of foldables, they approached us saying, we want to do this, we think we can do it now. We're worried about the ecosystem impact. By ecosystem here, the OEMs were talking about you, the developers. They wanted to make sure this was easy for you. They wanted your apps to work really well on their devices, hopefully with no work from you. That's always the hope, right? Is that you don't want developers to have to do work, because again, you have your own work to do. You don't. Why should you have to do special work for someone else, right? That's kind of how they think about it. And so, we work really closely together with them on figuring out how can we use existing APIs and make them work that way, And so, by the way, this is just to go back to one of your earlier questions. There's a nice benefit here too, because a lot of that work that you may be doing for foldables will be useful for Chrome OS, your app on Chrome OS, because resizable apps and things like that are very useful. So again, it's kind of a two birds, three birds, one stone type of moment, and that's what we live for. We like that.
I do want to talk about Chrome OS, but before we go there, I want to ask, what foldable phone are you using these days?
I am using, I didn't bring it on stage, but I am using a Fold still.
Okay.
I was actually with some folks of the press, and they were a little bit surprised that I still have one. The reason why I still have one is because, we work closely with Samsung on making sure these APIs are working and so on. But it's really fun. Actually, I really like it. Let's set aside manufacturing and et cetera for a second.
Let's just talk about folding phones. It's a new concept for us.
It's really interesting. For me, I found that I'm much more intentional about when I use my phone.
Okay.
Which I didn't expect that. I thought foldable equals more screens, bigger screens, so
Right.
I'm going to get lost in my phone more. But it's actually had the opposite effect because the display on the outside, in the case of the Samsung device, the display on the outside, I use it mostly for quick triage. You know, if someone
Right.
sends me a text message and I need to quickly reply, or maybe I'm dealing with my notifications. But then when I actually want to use my phone, I'm much more intentional because I physically open the thing up, and so it's much less that I've sort of accidentally 30 minutes later I'm still on my phone. It's much more intentional, and I actually kind of like that quite a bit, and I'm very productive on it too. It's getting a lot of work done on that because the extra screen size really does help.
Are you using it with like a Bluetooth keyboard? Like, are you doing
Just-
the whole little?
Yeah, just a in-screen, on-screen keyboard works great.
All right.
That's great. So I'm pretty bullish on foldables in general. Not talking about any specific OEM's
no,
device,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just
yeah.
in general as a concept. I don't think it's going to be a fad. I think it's going to, it'll take a few years, obviously, right? They're very expensive right now, and it's not yet available commercially to buy yet,
Right.
So it's going to take a while for these things to become more mainstream, but I think they will. I don't think it's not going to be like, remember 3D TVs? Like, you would go to a
Yes, I
store.
remember the three CESs and the 3D TVs. Yes.
Exactly. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's going to actually be a thing that a lot of us will be using.
Honestly, I feel like that's kind of everybody's feeling the same way about foldable phones. Just like this is a thing that is going to happen, and a lot of buzz around it, a lot of people exciting. I was surprised by it, but I also think it's interesting how quickly Android adopted the idea of the foldable to make it say, well, this is happening, so there you go.
Totally. And by the way, that is one of the benefits, if I may, of Android, I think. It's open source, you all know this. And so, foldables or anytime there's like a big disruption or new idea or new technology, just the open source nature of Android and how manufacturers can take it and modify it and do what they want to it, while remaining compatible, is an advantage for the platform. So that's why you're seeing foldables first on Android. You're seeing 5G first on Android. You saw 4G first on Android. We talked about it a little bit at the keynote. A lot of firsts on Android, and that's not just bragging. It's just sort of pointing out the benefits of how we've developed this system and the ecosystem. Of course, that means a little more burden in some ways, depending on how you look at it, for developers, because you're like, oh God, there's yet another thing. But it's also an opportunity, for you to be able to do interesting things for various different types of devices, and it might unleash new use cases for you.
It seems like a lot of the tools that are offered for developers are very thoughtful, especially I've noticed a lot of things sort of being not necessarily sequestered, but just so many little pieces make up the OS now to just kind of make it easy to put in the right puzzle piece when it needs to be shined and cleaned, to offer a metaphor.
Yeah, well, mainline, I think I don't know if you
Right.
literally mean it in this sense, but yeah, we're trying to modularize the operating system more. There are benefits, there are benefits from a security standpoint, updatability standpoint. Frankly, there's also benefits just from, sorry, this is a little bit inside baseball, but within the group, it's easier for us, if things are more modular, it's just like your code, right? Like modular code is easier to maintain and release and so on. And so there's benefits there. And so we're definitely moving more and more into that direction, for sure.
All right, switching gears, you are a big user of Chrome OS and you are overseeing it. So Chrome OS has really increased in popularity in the last couple of years. I personally see a lot more of it out in the wild. And I'm using it daily to do my work.
That's
so
great.
well, it helps that it's being worked on. So can you talk a little bit about the trajectory? Because I mean, people want to know what is the future of Chrome OS, and especially about Chrome OS's favorite color, which I heard is fuchsia. Yeah. Wow. You kind of predicted this. By the way, Flo and I were talking earlier, and I was like, what are you going to ask me, my favorite color? And she's like, as long as it's fuchsia. So, she's been trying to get this in, and I guess, yes.
Yeah. So we can talk about fuchsia in a second. Chrome OS, I'm very excited about, actually. Of course, I'm going to say that, but I genuinely, I think Chrome OS has a real shot, just to step back for a second, right? I think it was developed sort of in a modern age. there are many other computing systems available for those form factors,
Right.
PCs. But I think Chrome OS had the advantage of being developed in a modern age, again, similar to Android, where we're able to learn from some of the past. And so security is one of the most important things, and a lot of technology is built into Chrome OS around that. The statelessness, the stability, the speed, the 4 S's.
Right.
Makes it a really interesting operating system, I think, for the future of computing. And so we're investing a lot in Chrome OS. I think we have a real shot. Commercially, it's been doing great. You said, you're starting to see a lot of people use Chrome
Yeah.
OS. I see that too, which I'm super excited to see that. The PC industry has been generally flat. Chrome OS has been growing like crazy. Q4 of 2018 in the US, we were a little over 20%.
I remember that stat.
Yeah. And so, we're growing significantly, and by bringing the Play Store, and there's also, if you're a web developer, obviously PWAs, and we have, a lot of ideas on how we can make web apps feel like native apps, whatever that means, on Chrome OS as well. So, sort of the best of both worlds, with the goal of making this something that people can use every day as their main, and maybe even only. That's what I do. I use, a Chromebook. I use a Pixel Slate for what it's worth. Every day as my primary and only PC. And then, of course, I have my Android phones with me for sort of a mobile scenarios. And I think a lot of people, a lot of you especially, should be able to do that already. And we want pretty much everyone in the world to be able to do that as well. So developer support, your support of Chrome OS is really, really important. Like I said, it's a growing segment. So really interesting stuff. And I think we can do some pretty interesting things. I feel like the difference of between, I remember when tablets first came out, everyone predicted the death of a PC. They're like, well,
Yes,
PCs are going away, tablets are going to take over, but
Right.
that really hasn't happened. Tablets are popular too, but PCs are still around too. So it wasn't like a mutually exclusive thing, and so
Right.
I think PCs are going to continue to be important in people's lives, and I feel like we can do some very interesting things around blending touch and sort of traditional PC form factor, keyboards, detachable devices, new experiences, and so you're starting to see us dabble in that a little bit, and we'll continue to invest there.
There's a lot of little usability tweaks that you can really take off from there. So back to this Fuchsia thing.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, sure.
What's the ethos behind it? Like,
Yeah.
what do we have to look forward to as users of these platforms?
Good question. I think so. Fuchsia, for those of you, there might be one person in this room who doesn't know what Fuchsia is. Has everyone heard of Fuchsia? Who hasn't heard of Fuchsia? Don't be embarrassed if you hadn't. Okay, a few people. Fuchsia is Google has many projects underway,
Right.
and we're a technology company, so we invest in various technologies and experiment and so on. And some of those experiments and investments we do in the public as an open source or as open source projects. Fuchsia is one of them, so it's an open source project by Google, and it's an investment by us in sort of modernizing and trying out new concepts around operating systems. So naturally, a lot of people sort of assume, well, it's a new OS from Google, so it must be the future, the one OS from Google. That's not how we look at it. We look at it as sort of a place where we can try out new ideas, and so whenever you see someone saying, oh, here's a phone running Fuchsia, that's really not our goal. It's not about sort of replacing Android or replacing Chrome OS. It is about learning new technologies, and maybe Fuchsia can be launched on certain form factors, different form factors. There are all kinds of devices that require operating systems. It's not just phones and PCs.
Right.
And in the world of IoT, there are increasing number of devices that require operating systems and
Right.
new runtimes and so on. So I think there's a lot of room for multiple operating systems with different strengths and specialization. So Fuchsia is one of those things. And so stay tuned. We'll continue working on it. And we enjoy that you love the intrigue in it, but there's really not much intrigue. It's just more techno.
Intrigue makes being a user of these things fun.
Right.
Because, it's much safer than other types of gossip in some cases. Are we seeing, so kind of back to Chrome OS just as a platform, are we seeing it go more the way of like the Mac and Windows and in terms of usability and compatibility and just like what it can do, or do we?
Yeah, we're going to be better than those things. No, honestly, I think, this is what I was saying. I really do think Chrome OS has a lot of the guts of being, the future of the next generation of computing. We need your support, though. We need the use cases. We need the, people don't, I think you all know this, people don't buy products for the operating system. As much as an operating system provider, I want to think that way. The reality is people buy devices and products because of what they can do with it, which is where you come into the picture. And so I think with the right set of applications, it really has, the ability to be the next generation of this touch and keyboard melded experience, with new types of form factors, whether they're detachables or other things that haven't been invented yet. So I think it is.
Or third-party operating system.
What do you mean, third-party?
Okay, so we have Linux apps.
oh, I see. Got it. Yeah, no, for sure. Running Linux, Android Studio is the way we're deploying Android Studio is a perfect example, right? It's running in a Linux container. It runs, I guess from Chrome OS's perspective, Android is another operating system in a way, right? So it supports many runtimes. The web is one runtime, and I would say the primary runtime, that's what Chrome OS started from.
That's a really good point, yeah.
Runs the Android runtime.
Right.
The Linux runtime, and maybe there are others in the future as the world evolves. We'll make sure we can support those.
How do you balance making sure that you can support those things compared to what is possible with the hardware that's available, like processors and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we work really closely with the industry on this. We have reference designs where we work with chip providers, chipset providers, and then OEMs.
Right.
And so we're involved in the road mapping of these products. So we make sure that the hardware and the software sort of match, capability-wise.
All right, well, we have time for just a couple more questions. So I think if we want to just chat a little bit about that thing you said earlier about the Play Store being this unifying link between Android and Chrome OS. Could you speak to that just a little bit more, just about like the vision for that, how to make it more than just, because I think a lot of users in particular see it as just like, this is the app store. This is the store where I get my apps. But how do you want to explain it so that people see it more than just, this is where I get the apps for my Google stuff?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people today, if you were to ask the sort of people not in the industry, they would say the Play Store is where you get your Android apps. Right? And this is where, the connective part, we want the Play Store and sort of the Android runtime, if you will, to be something that you think of crossing multiple form factors. Again, we talked about Chrome OS in that context. So it's kind of the unifying layer. And what unifies it is these APIs, the console, the tools, the policies, all these things, and this is where we talked a little bit about privacy earlier.
Right.
That comes into the picture as well. So we see it as, internally my group is known as, well, you can see it on the slide, platforms and ecosystems. That's how we think of ourselves. We pride platforms and ecosystems, and Play is sort of the main ecosystem.
Right. So kind of to round off our conversation here, in the spirit of it being Google I/O, what was one of your favorite announcements that was made this week? Just your personal favorite, maybe something you were really excited for people to hear about, or just something you're particularly proud of, or...
Well, I'm always, a number of things. I'm going to cheat and give you multiple answers.
Okay, no problem.
I do think, you mentioned that the privacy topic is an important one. And I think especially for you as a developer, it's important that we stay in sync on this and that we understand each other well on this and the motivations behind it. We want to make sure that we're adapting to the modern way in which people think about privacy, consumers think of it, and we want to make sure we're adapting to that technologically together. So I think that's an important part, and there have been many sessions about it, and we talked about it at the keynote. Sundar talked about it sort of in general terms as well. So that's, I think, an important part. I also think, I was talking to someone about this earlier, a lot of the work that we're doing that has a positive impact on people's lives around accessibility, for instance, I'm really proud of that. I think that, to be able
live captions is
live captions is a great example, right?
Yeah.
And I think that live captions, or there was that video we showed of that mother in India who now can, with lens and so. I think these are really. I know it's going to sound corny, but makes me feel really proud that we're able to be a part of creating that sort of thing. And many of you do that too through your applications and through your innovations. You're helping people, you know. And I think that having that sense of purpose, I think makes it really important, you know, and makes me feel like we're working on important stuff, which is fun. It's always easy to get caught up in like how many gigabytes or how many what, you know, how many lines of code, but really just stepping back and thinking like, okay, we've helped people, you know, and accomplished something. That's really cool, I think.
I was going to say at the same rate, the technical achievement of being able to whittle down 2 gigs of data into just merely kilobytes of files is is really neat.
Yes, the language model. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah.
Did that have anything to do, by the way, with Now Playing? Was that derived from that?
No,
it sounded similar to me.
It's similar in concept in that they're both on device.
Right.
These models are on on device, so it's not leaving the device.
Right.
Similar in that sense, but yes, they're very different domains in that one's music and one's words. But yeah, very similar concept in that sense.
All right, well, we're just about nearing the end here, so I kind of just want to, I feel like, you know what, it's the last day, let's be a little philosophical and dreamy, so look into your crystal ball for Android and the platforms that you manage. What are you just really looking forward to in the future, beyond the little beta that we have going out right now?
Yeah, I think rewind a little bit, right? If we think back to even just 5 years ago, or maybe even less. You know, we're doing so many things on our devices, whether they're phones or laptops or whatever, you know, home devices. We're doing things on these devices that really we couldn't do before, where we would talk about it sort of in the abstract, like, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this? Well, we can now do a lot of these things. And so I'm excited about the future in terms of just not even knowing where these things are going to head. You know, there's just so many opportunities, and we have, I think, the right foundations in place, you know, the right security and privacy mindset, the right mindset around helping users and all that. With that in mind, how to evolve technology together with the OEMs, with you as developers, with the network providers. I think a lot of possibilities. That gets me really excited.
Hashtag the possibilities are endless.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you so much, Hiroshi.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time.
And thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of I.O. Thank you.